I guess we can start recording, right?
If you think about the counter to my question about stopping flooding and how that fits into a larger picture, that would be really helpful.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, guys. Thank you for joining the March meeting of WPE here, Waterfront Parks Environment here at Community Board 4. Under emergency order of the governor, we are conducting this meeting via Zoom. So why don't we just go right into the agenda? We're switching up the agenda a little bit. Maya Burlow from Senator Brad Hoylman's office is just going to go first. She is, after our long and lengthy discussion and letter on composting for New York City, she is just going to follow up on what Senator Hoylman's office is doing. Hi, Maya.
Hello, thank you. Good to see everyone's face. Been a while for some of you. My name's Maya. I'm Senator Hoylman's Deputy Chief of Staff and Legislative Director. I don't need to tell you about New York City's trash problem. It's an eyesore, it's unsanitary, it feeds the rat population, and it's really bad for the environment. We generate 1 million tons of organic waste annually. That's about 11 pounds of organic waste per household per week. That's from food, soiled paper, and yard waste. And landfill trash in New York generates about 1 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions each year, in large part due to the portion of organic waste in that system. Basically, when organic waste decomposes in an anaerobic environment of a landfill, it produces methane, which is way more harmful than greenhouse gases. And so when we saw that Eric Adams was removing the city composting program, we introduced legislation to require mandatory organics recycling from every residential building in New York City. So the bill number is S8374. It will have an assembly one soon. They just operate a little slower in terms of bill processing. But what the legislation does is it amends the general city law to require cities with a population of over 1 million, which in New York State is only New York City, to establish a residential composting program for all buildings that have residential units. And it basically says, hey, city, you need to establish standards for waste separation and collection that are with best management practices of avoiding odor, avoiding vermin. That includes requiring latched containers for separation of organics, which will have a big impact on the rat population. And you need to provide guidance on how to do this effectively and how residents can separate their waste. Something we saw with the pilot programs is that there was just a lack of information about how to do it correctly. There's some requirements about how buildings need to set up their composting collection areas. So it needs to be reasonably accessible to residents and maintained by building owners and managers. And then the bill lays out some requirements for waste transporters to ensure that the waste is being appropriately handled and not just dumped in a landfill. When I say composting, it's just sort of the colloquial term, but we're really talking about a wide range of organic recycling options. This state enacted legislation this past year that would divert food from the restaurant industry, either to food that was edible to people who can eat it, and various organics recycling for unedible food. And our legislation basically provides the same array of organics recycling options that already exist at the state level. So that's composting, that's anaerobic digestion, which can generate biogas and is what we do with some of our sewage already. It's animal feed and a few other ways of reusing that waste. And the last main thing that the bill does is that it allows the city to be eligible to apply for state assistance to turn this into a reality. There's a fund for waste management reduction projects at the state level. And so we just clarify that that this project would be eligible for those funds. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the update. And I'm glad Senator Hoylman sprung into action after the mayor said what he said about composting. Anyone have questions for Maya? Sally?
So this is more of a general question. Thank you, Maya. We're all very upset about the garbage situation in the city. Eric Botcha sent out an email this morning about signing a petition spearheaded by Sandy Nurse. I haven't signed it yet because I was waiting on my comment section, which I'll probably do after tonight's meeting, but I'll throw it out there because I'm quite sure Eric's office is also on this call, that it's obvious enough to me, all the things that you state, all the issues with rats and everything that comes from having garbage on the street is a health hazard, et cetera. But there's one thing that we haven't highlighted with it, which seems to be one of the mayor's most important priorities, and that's tourism. So I think someone should point out to the mayor that when people come into Chelsea or any of our neighborhoods to go to restaurants and theater, and they have to trip over garbage and trip over rats because we have all this food on the street, it's really not going to motivate tourists to visit our establishments. So if we can't get them where it really counts as a health hazard and all the environmental hazard, all of those things, let's talk to him about tourism and how tourists don't love stepping over rats and garbage.
Sally, have you seen our budget letter, our response to the budget proposal for the mayor?
Does it cover tourism?
So in our budget task force, I'll tell everyone, we go over the budget and what our asks were. Obviously, we had a lot of DSNY asks, and our response to the cuts were, in general, you were the one that said you wanted to clean up the city. You were the one that said you wanted people to come back to work. You were the one that said you want people to come back through our transportation hubs and tourism. How can you do that? And you were the one that said you wanted, New York to be revived out of COVID. How can we do that if you are slashing specifically DSNY budget and not even restoring what we had pre-COVID? So anyway, what CB4 will have, I think that letter will be circulated next month or the month after when we talk about the budget response. Anyway, I just wanted to specifically
just put poor tourism in bold.
Right.
Tourists don't like rats, don't like garbage. My comments. Thank you.
Thanks,
Roberta?
Sally.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
Can I, so on sort of the budget point, right, the mayor is sort of pitching this, right, as a cost savings. There was a really great report done by the IBO, and Leslie, I'm happy to send it to you. I know CB4 does very detailed letters, so we'll send you all the resources. That basically explains that why a composting program right now is expensive is because we're doing so little of it. And basically, as you increase the amount of compost, the cost per tonnage goes down, and at a not very high amount of composting gets to be like a sort of net zero, if not making money or sort of paying for itself with selling either biogas or soil.
Maya, would you send that letter to both the chairs? To me as well.
Of course.
Thank you.
Definitely, Marty.
Roberta?
Sure. Thanks for sharing this, Maya. Really exciting piece of legislation. I was just curious, 2 questions about it. One, is there, a target time through which you would hope to pass it? And then 2, if it does require any funding in particular, and you may have touched on this, but I'd just love to hear a little bit more.
Sure. So earliest that it would move in the legislature is basically after the budget. The budget is due April 1st, and we have not been reviewing basically new legislation. So, a hope would be that it passes between April 1st and June 2nd when the end of session happens. In the bill itself, the city has a year to establish the residential composting program. My guess is that it's something that would be negotiated, but that's sort of the target right now. There's a lot of different estimates about how much this would cost. Citizens Budget Commission did a report in 2016 that basically said, like, ultimately the cost is not very high. They need to retrofit the trucks to separate organic waste from other waste. So there's like upfront costs, but ultimately we wouldn't be spending more than we do on regular trash collection, and we might be able to actually generate funding from it. We did build in the waste management reduction project funds into the legislation. The statute on that basically says that it can cover up to 50% cost of a project. I would imagine realistically they would not cover up to 50% of New York City's waste management project. And my guess, based on how other cities have used that funding, is that it would be more likely that they would use it to help cover cost of like education materials. That seems to be how a lot of other cities have done it. But I can send you the CDC reports as well about funding.
Does anyone else have any questions for Maya? Because I have one or two. All right. So Maya, I just have a few questions. We know Brad, Senator Hoylman, a bunch of others, like something happens and they always react with like a bill, right? Like something. So what is the realistic? Give us like what you think the feedback from the other senators are that this will pass. I mean, it has to pass both houses. I mean, it's a big deal because when the mayor says he's pulling this, and then the state says, sorry, we're going to make you do this huge project. It's a big deal. So just in realistic terms, what is the feedback you're hearing for this specific bill?
So we've heard, one of the exciting things about this bill is that we've gotten so much outreach from community members across the city. I mean, I'm hearing from like Queens community board members and people that run their local compost groups like throughout the city. So that's really exciting. And I think that that sort of like speaks to where CB4's advocacy can come in as well, is that this is such a local issue that it's really important that we hear from community boards. I think that a borough board resolution would go a very long way in pushing this legislation forward. It's definitely going to be an issue that most senators defer to the city members on because the over 1 million population is just New York City at this moment in time. Yeah, so I mean, we just need to gain support of the city members. I think we've seen general support for like sanitation issues, and now the next step is just getting them to sign on. I do think, you know, bills can sit in Albany for years and not go anywhere. You're very familiar with that. I do think the mayor coming out so strongly against composting did create a moment that has infuriated a lot of people and has, you know, been able, trash has sort of become a sexy issue in a way that it wasn't before or before the pandemic. The other thing that I would point out is that New York City has a goal to reduce the total waste disposed by 90% by 2030. We're like nowhere near that. And we can't do that without organics recycling. So if New York City wants to meet its climate goals and waste reduction goals, this is something that they have to get on board with and need to do to achieve that goal in the next 7-8 years.
I mean, we wrote a very strong letter just this past month about it. What would you suggest we could do to push it? Because I have a feeling anything you guys do up there, the mayor is going to push back on, obviously, because he obviously doesn't believe in this particular programming at this particular time.
Yeah. So letter is great. Talking to other boards that you have connections with, really helpful. Getting local groups in CB4 and other parts of the city that you know who are interested in environmental issues or organic recycling to write memos of support, like individual memos of support would be really helpful. So basically we just have like a thick stack of local groups in the city saying this is something that we're interested in. What else? I mentioned borough board resolution, and I had one other thought. I mean, one of the sort of good news items is in a hearing last week, the DSNY commissioner was asked point blank about this legislation and another composting bill in the Senate. And while he, can't say that he is in favor of it, he did say that he thinks that he would be in favor of any mandatory composting program. So we do have the support of DSNY. And so I think there's just a balance of being able to support that from the constituent side to the mayor.
Thanks, Maya. Robert Atterbury is in the public from Hudson River Park Trust and he has his hand up. Robert, is this about this with the composting? Because I know Hudson River Park Trust has a healthy composting program. If you can thanks, Janine.
You're welcome.
So on composting, I just want to flag, we do have our compost tracker, which we recently released. Folks should hopefully have heard about already, where folks can look at how much each individual community is depositing in our composting pieces. It's on our website. It's actually a pretty cool tool, particularly when a lot of the city sites were shut down. You can look at how much of that was diverted into Hudson River Park's composting system.
Thanks, Robert. Mirno?
Yeah, my question is not really related to composting, but since you are from Senator Hoylman's office, I wanted to ask about his new bill regarding the LGBT youth suicide prevention task force. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So it's not his bill. It originally was his bill, but it's Senator Salazar's bill. It passed the Senate this week. I am not fully up to date on the requirements of the task force, but I have your email. I'm happy to send you updates on that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Maya. We appreciate it. The update.
All right.
See
Thanks
ya.
all. Bye.
Bye. Next on our agenda is our recycling discussion, but if you guys will allow me, Robert Atterbury is here and I don't want him to stay for the whole thing. I think he has, Robert, I see you. I got you. That you have one small update for us from Hudson River Park Trust, and I don't want you to wait for a very long meeting to give us one update. So go ahead.
Thank you. So the update I just want to give everyone is that at long last, after many requests, we are moving forward with our renovation of the Pr84 Dog Run. So one of our popular dog runs, all of them are popular, I will say. It's going to have newly have a new water feature, a spray fountain, a water fountain with a pet bowl. We're improving the seating. We'll have a new, more paw-friendly resurfacing. Part of it. It's super exciting. It's going to be great. Something I think we've heard a lot of people interested in there before from community before. I will say with improvements comes the first part, which is a little bit of a pain. We will have to close the dog run for construction. As I've been telling people, dog runs construction vehicles and dogs don't mix well. So we will be closing it on April 28th. And reopening it, I believe late summer is our current construction timeframe. I don't have an exact date, but it's towards the end of the summer, sort of very early fall at the latest. So that's my update, and I'll turn it over. I know you guys have Marty has some other updates on us, but I will turn it back over to you guys.
Does anyone have a question for, Chris, go ahead.
Mute.
I have double mutes just in case. One on my microphone, one on my computer. No, Martin actually had his hand up prior, so I'll yield to him.
Go, Chris.
Thank you. So that's great to know that's going to be renovated. How is the trust working with the community to let members of the dog owners community know that park is not going to be available to them? Because there's 54 park, and then there is a private dog run at one of the Silverstein buildings on 42nd Street between 11th and 12th, but those are the only two of the dog runs. Now you're on mute.
Now I'm on mute. Now it's my fault. I do believe there is one at DeWitt Clinton, which is not far. And so we are just rolling it out sort of as of today. I really hit the schedule correct for you guys. So signs will be going up at the dog run in the next few days to let people know so they can start sort of making alternative plans. And we are reaching out to some of the dog run owners and leaders, community leaders in that area to let people know. I have a number of messages out to try to help make sure folks are aware of the coming disruption. We know it's always difficult for folks to find other dog runs, but it will be better after construction is over.
Marty?
To the best of my knowledge, we haven't seen the design. Is that correct?
I believe you have. It has been presented at a committee some time ago, maybe been over a year ago, of the design. It's a pretty short deck because it's a fairly small space. If you want, I'm happy to send over.
Yeah, can you resend that, Robert?
Yeah, I can look up what date the park presented on it. It was obviously before my time, but it was, I believe, some time ago.
And so you can't really, there must have been comments when we saw the original stack, and you must have incorporated some changes into it. So the original stack isn't probably what we want to see. What we'd like to see is what the current design is.
I can forward over what the current design is. I can do that. The discussion point of it is all, again, before my time. So I will have to go back and look to see what, if any, comments there were, changes made. Just
you know, the reason I'm asking the question is that we usually see and comment on designs, and if there are significant changes as a result of that conversation, we usually see an update before the contracts are signed. And so I'm a little surprised actually that we're hearing about the closing in this way.
I believe that the design was presented. It's again a very small space. Like I'm struggling to imagine that there were many comments at all, because there's not a lot that one can do in order to on it. There's some seating, there's the fountain, and there's the resurfacing. It's not a grand revisioning. Again, it's this big. So
thanks for sending the materials.
Great. And I know if you want to, I don't know if you want to give your update on where things are with Chelsea Piers, but
I think we're going to wait for that because
okay.
We have a presentation, and I don't want to, if that's okay,
Okay.
So, but thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Robert and the dog run? And I was telling him on the phone, Robert, this is the second dog run that's being closed at Hudson River Park at the same time.
We're investing in our dog runs. It's great.
Okay. All right. You must have read the dog poop letter from last month. All right. Thanks, Robert. Okay. Let's get into, I guess, the meat of our meeting. We are joined very happily by Kara Napolitano. She is the Education Outreach Coordinator at Sims Recycling Facility. And for those of you who are not familiar with Sims, they have a number of recycling plants in our area. And Kara, correct me if I'm wrong, I think, is the Brooklyn one of the biggest ones in the Northeast or something? Or
Yeah,
is the
it's
biggest?
the biggest facility of its kind in the country, if not the world.
Oh, great. Wow. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for having me. Lovely being here with you, virtual, but still great to see some faces. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can move through this virtual tour. I'm going to move a bit quickly. So if there are any questions, then we will take them at the end. I love taking questions. It's my favorite part, but I'll offer up the information and then we'll get to that after. So I'm Karen Napolitano, the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Sims Municipal Recycling. We are a very large facility located on the waterfront, as you can see here in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. A couple other neat things you can see from this angle. Well, in a moment, you're going to get a great view of the Staten Island waterfront. Again, we can see it all from our facility. But from this angle, you can also see our solar panels and our wind turbine. So we do have one of the larger, no longer the largest, but one of the larger solar arrays in Brooklyn. And we have the city's first and I believe still only commercial scale wind turbine. We're very excited and happy to have that right in our front yard. And altogether, those forms of renewable energy can power up to about 12 to 15% of our very large facility. So Sims Municipal Recycling, that is the name of our company, but the type of facility we are is what's called a material recovery facility or a MRF. And I just kind of like to poll, has anyone ever heard of a MRF? Hands, if you've heard of the MRF. Oh, great. So for many of you, we are your first MRF. That's lovely. I think we're a good first. So a MRF, you haven't heard of it, but it's actually a very common type of facility. A material recovery facility is essentially a sorting facility for recyclables. MRFs exist around the country. MRFs exist around the world because think about how we recycle, right? We mix different types of materials, metal, glass, plastic, into one bin. So then someone has to come along and separate out those different materials so they again become valuable and useful. And that is the job of a MRF. That's what we do at Sims. Sims Municipal Recycling, we receive 100% of New York City's residential metal, glass, and plastic recycling. We receive some of the paper as well. I'll get into that, but really what we're handling is the metal, glass, plastic, and cartons. And we receive about 1,000 tons of this stuff every single day. So I know you haven't heard of a MRF before, so you may not know 1,000 tons is a lot for a facility to sort in one day. And that actually makes us, that large tonnage is actually what makes us the largest MRF in the country, if not in the world. So you can get a nice view of our whole facility here, the whole of an acre pier. You can see the solar panels and turbine again. And you can also see our barges. So we are located right on the waterfront to allow for waterfront and barge access. So barges is a main way that we move recyclables from other parts of the city. We are down in Sunset Park. So trucks collecting in Brooklyn will come directly to us, but trucks that have collected in Upper Manhattan or the Bronx or Queens will go to one of our transfer facilities where the truck unloads. The recyclables are placed onto a barge and the barge will continue down the East River to us, where the sorting really happens. The sorting primarily happens in Brooklyn at this facility. All right, so let's go through the recycling process. I'm sort of gonna fly through the whole process of recycling. And this is the part that you probably are most familiar with, right? What do we actually, as New Yorkers, get to put into our recycling bins? So I'm hoping to bust all myths and reveal all mysteries revolving around this evening. First of all, I want to be clear. New York City separates its recyclables into 2 bins. I'm going to bet you all knew that. But all of the homes and all the public schools in all of New York City really need you to separate your recyclables into these 2 bins. So what goes in those bins? Well, first of all, in this blue bin with this lovely blue poster created by our Department of Sanitation, there are 4 accepted materials. So we have metal, glass bottles and jars, rigid plastic, and cartons. Let me break that down a bit for you. So when it comes to metal, in New York City, you can put anything that is mostly metal in that blue recycling bin. Anything. So soda cans and tin cans, absolutely, no problem. Aluminum foil, yep. Aerosol cans, as long as they're empty, yeah, we'll take them. But look what else is on that poster. Pots and pans, filing cabinets, microwaves, air conditioners, bed frames, refrigerators, again, anything that's metal. You can recycle it in New York City. There is a process for refrigerators and air conditioners. You have to have what's called the CFC, it's like the cooling chemical, removed. DSNY will do that for you. You go on their website, you make an appointment, you put out your item, and if no one steals it, they come along, they remove the CFC, and then it can be recycled. So all metal. When it comes to glass, it's a bit more limited. The only glass you may recycle is bottles and jars. All right, any bottle or jar, any shape, size, or color, but bottles and jars only. So no broken window panes, no mirrors, no ceramic mugs. Those are all a different type of glass. And the companies that are actually buying the glass from us, they are making, you already guessed it, they are making bottles and jars. So that's the type of glass they need. There aren't companies buying recycled glass and making more mirrors or more ceramic mugs. That's just not happening on a large scale. So when it comes to glass recycling, it's bottles and jars only. Next is cartons. Everyone, cartons go in the blue bin. In case you were wondering, they do not go in the green bin. I know they are made of paper, but they are actually coated in plastic. There is a layer of plastic on the outside and a layer of plastic on the inside. Because of all that plastic, we put them in the blue bin with other plastic items, which brings me to the last fourth item, rigid plastic. In New York City, you may recycle all rigid plastic. The numbers on there, they don't matter. Doesn't matter the number inside the recycling symbol. Those are confusing. That just because a plastic has that recycling symbol with the number inside it, that doesn't mean it's recyclable. That's just telling you what type of plastic it is. Okay, so we don't use that in New York City. We say all rigid plastic. So here's the test that I teach the kids that I think is pretty straightforward. If it's plastic and you set it on the counter and it keeps its shape, it doesn't fall down, then it's rigid. It belongs in the bin. But if it's plastic and you set it on the counter and it falls down and doesn't keep its shape, that's not rigid. So that does not belong in your recycling bin. Basically no bags, pouches, or wrappers or wrapping, right? That's the blue bin. Common questions. How clean does it have to be? It doesn't have to be perfectly clean. Give it a little rinse and put it in the bin. You know, don't waste water about it. Just give a little rinse, quick rinse, and put it in, and that's fine. People also ask, caps on or caps off? So if it's the same, it should remain, all right? Plastic caps stay on plastic bottles, and that goes for cartons as well. You leave that plastic cap on. But if you have a glass bottle or jar, well, that usually has a metal lid, so that's a different type of material. Go ahead and take that metal lid off, put them both into the bin. That's the blue bin. The green bin, so much simpler. It's just paper and cardboard. If you can rip it, you can recycle it in the green bin. That includes pizza boxes, okay? In New York City, you may recycle pizza boxes even if they have grease on them. It's fine. Please just don't leave the pizza in the box. That's all we ask. Somebody started a rumor that pizza boxes are not recyclable in New York City, and I don't like that rumor because it is very untrue. So please help me spread the correct non-rumor but truth. All right, and then everything else that's not one of those items goes in the trash. And now I took out my composting slide because y'all heard from Allie, I think last week, so hopefully she went into that. If you have, the one thing I'll say, if you have access to some sort of composting opportunity, whether it be drop off or a brown bin or those cool little smart bins, please compost if you can. That type of waste makes up 1/3 to 1/2 of everything you throw away. I'm sure you are aware of this. Please, it makes a difference. Compost, recycle, yes, but also compost if you can. All right. So once you do your part and you put the thing into the bin, where does it go? That's the part that you probably don't think about or ever see. So DSNY trucks pick it up, they collect it from your home, and then bring it to a SIMS facility. So that is a truck unloading at our Brooklyn facility. But some recyclables, as I said before, will come to us on barges. So barges travel down the East River, bringing us recyclables from the Bronx, Upper Manhattan, and Queens. And then it all ends up right here in this big room called our tipping floor. Great big pile of mixed materials. That green crane you see in the background is scooping recyclables off a barge and throwing them onto a pile. And this room with the pile, it always looks like this. It's always a mountain of mixed materials. What you're looking at is less than half a day of New York City's recycling. I do hope you all get to see it in person someday because it's quite impactful. So if you look a little closer at that pile, though, you will see there are two. Because remember, we separated our recyclables into two bins. So we have a pile for the metal, glass, plastic, and cartons, and a pile for the paper. We do not have to sort the paper because it's already separate. So we load it onto a truck, and that truck goes to a paper mill. And most of New York City's recycled paper goes to a paper mill on Staten Island called Pratt. They've been around since the 90s processing New York City's recycled paper. Some of that paper they actually use to make pizza boxes. Appropriate New York story for you right there. So paper is done, but at SIMS, we still need to sort through all that metal, glass, plastic, and cartons. So this is a picture of the system we use to sort it. This thing is 2.5 miles of conveyor belts. It takes about 35 humans to operate this system. It is operating 24 hours a day. Here it is in person. It is operating 24 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. Again, sorting 1,000 tons a day. And once an item enters this system, it'll be out in anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes. It's very, very fast. And I'm just going to quickly point out the key technologies that we use in this system to sort the metal from the glass, from the plastic, and cartons. So our technologies. First, we use screens to sort glass. So these spinning metal rods, materials roll over the top, right? So plastic and metal just roll right over, but glass fits into those metal rods and breaks into small pieces that fall through. They fall right through the screens. And this is how we sort the glass. Again, breaking it and screening it out once it's in those small pieces. For sorting metals, we have a giant spinning magnet that attracts the magnetic metal and then drops it onto another conveyor belt. For non-magnetic metal, we actually have a reversed magnet called an eddy current that repels non-magnetic metal through the air. I won't give you an in-depth description because I'm not a physics person, but eddy current repels non-ferrous metal. And then for plastic and cartons, we use optical scanners. So these are like very fancy cameras. They use near infrared light to identify the chemical makeup of the materials that pass by a room. So all these fancy cameras, we have 16 of them, and we can program each one to look for a different type of plastic or material. So when it finds what it's looking for, it turns on an air jet at the end of the conveyor belt and check out what happens. So everything gets scanned, it finds the plastic it wants, and then that air jet goes and shoots that piece of plastic over a barrier onto another conveyor belt, and we've sorted our plastic or carton or whatever. So all that technology is great, but it is not perfect. It's close, but not as perfect as we'd like it to be. So the last step is humans. In our facility, humans do a final sort, a final cleanup, removing anything in the wrong place or anything that does not belong, or in some cases, recovering valuables that may have been missed. After that, that is our final sorting step. After that, we can make our bales. So our baler compresses the recyclables into bales, very tight cubes that each weigh over 1,000 pounds. And that's really what we make at a MRF. A MRF makes bales. We aren't cleaning the stuff. We aren't turning it into new things. I'll show you a bit of that in a second. We're just sorting and baling. And these bales are our commodities. That's what we sell. And these commodities, these different types of bales, all have different values. And those values can change drastically over time. The market's looking pretty good right now. It was not looking good pre-COVID and in the beginning of COVID. It actually got much better during COVID. But that's one of the big challenges in the recycling industry is this volatile market, you know, whereas our operations, the fee for our operations, that's staying steady. That's not changing, but the money we make off of the materials can change drastically. So that's one reason we're trying to pass EPR in New York State. If you've heard of extended producer responsibility, it will help fund recycling programs. Producers of materials will actually have to pay into municipalities to fund waste management and recycling programs. EPR, we're hopeful for this year. So after we bail the stuff, load it onto trucks. Some of it will actually be loaded onto trains or rail cars when you can get them. But then the materials leave SIMS and they go on to completely different companies that use them to make new things. So just a short snapshot of that before I come to a close. So that water bottle that you recycle is going to be chopped up into flakes, washed, melted, and then chopped up into little pellets. That will be sold again to another company that might use them to make more water bottles. That's the goal. That's the circular kind of bottle to bottle goal. But what happens a lot now is actually water bottles end up as clothing, textiles, or carpeting. Not a circular model, but a lot of bottles can go into a carpet, and a carpet isn't going to become waste again for hopefully a significant amount. Colorful plastic, similar, but we don't have the ability to remove color from plastic. So generally, colorful plastics are mixed together to form a black plastic. Many of them end up as these big black drainage pipes that can go on for long periods of time and be very large. They can be bigger than a person. And metals. So metals like aluminum, they'll be smelted and really can be used to make anything made of that same type of metal. So if you recycle your aluminum can, it could be another aluminum can back on the shelf in a matter of weeks. But it could also be a part of a bicycle or a part of a car or a part of an airplane or a part of anything that's made from aluminum. Clear glass bottles and jars will most likely become more bottles and jars, as I said before. Colorful glass may or may not become another bottle or jar. It really depends on the market and what those glass bottlers are buying and using. Sometimes colored glass will actually become a construction aggregate, like a filler. So we used that stuff. It's called recycled glass aggregate. We used it to raise our facility above the 100-year flood line because we're surrounded by water on 3 sides. So to protect against future flooding, we use recycled glass aggregate again to raise ourselves up. And that is the story of recycling, because once it's that next thing, it's back on the shelf and you have to buy it again. Please buy things that are made with recycled content if you can. Look for, you know, companies that are starting to promote made with post-consumer recycled content, or, you know, made with post-consumer resin. Look for that word post-consumer and recycle. And if you can, buy that stuff, because that supports recycling. That closes the loop, as they say. That's really the next step that keeps it going, helps to keep it going. But more importantly, I just talked to you about recycling for about 15 minutes, and I have to close it out with this. Because recycling is good, recycling is important, it helps our city. Hopefully it helps our city make money if markets are looking good. But please remember that recycling alone is not the solution, and it pales in comparison to reduction and reuse. Okay, those are the R words that really have the impact. So I encourage you, you know, while you may leave here thinking of recycling, don't forget about reduce and reuse. You know, they're the more important R words. We need to incorporate them into our lives first. And that's what I have for you. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Kara, thank you so much. I mean, that was great, really. I mean, I might be a recycling nerd, so I really liked it. But
me too.
And also, we wanted you on because just to give you a little bit of reference here, our Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee is trying to stress a little bit more of the environment in our meetings and in our committee and what comes out of it. And I just think this is a really good baseline background when we go to the city, when we ask for something, when we want to know about corner basket collection, stuff like that, that this is super, super helpful because it gives us at least a pedestrian or working knowledge of it.
Great.
But, yeah. I think we can go to full screen so we can see, I could see hands if anyone wants to ask Kara a question. Marty.
Too many buttons, sorry. I want to repeat what you said. This is one of the better presentation, Kara, that I have seen of the entire recycling process. I want to thank you very much for it. I have two questions, actually. Your reduce comment at the very end. I'm going to leave questions about the physical recycling process and more information about the MRF to other people if they have them. But the reduce has always bothered me a lot, because the implication of reduce is that it's up to us as individuals to reduce. And I think that's as far from the truth as it could possibly be. Reduce is very much a manufacturer's issue. Reduce packaging, reduce the amount of materials used, design packages so that they are smaller, design packages so that they are appropriately used. New York City, as you aptly described, accepts all sorts of plastics, but some plastics are more recyclable than others. And part of reduce, it seems to me, in the recycling scheme is to use more PET and HDPE, which are numbers 1 and 2, that are more readily recyclable than the others. And that's not up to me as an individual. That's up to the manufacturing people. And I think we as a group should be paying a whole lot more attention to that. I will let you comment on that before I have my second comment.
Great. And I would say it's not going to be the job of any one group. You know, the manufacturers have a lot to do, and they know it. Are they doing it fast enough? I'm not going to share my opinion on that, but they know that the number 1s and the number 2s are the ones that are the most recyclable. And I'll tell you, some of them are working very hard to change over to number 1s and number 2s only. So in some cases that is happening. Again, is it happening fast enough? I'm going to save my personal comments on that. It's a big undertaking is one thought. But all players have to participate. They have to make changes on the design side, and we have to make changes on the personal side as well. It's everyone. I would also say, you know, considering EPR, I don't know what EPR will really do for reduction overall, but it should make materials more recyclable. It has the potential to drive packaging designers to make their packaging more recyclable. So at least it could help in that.
Design for recycling.
Exactly.
So thank you for that. The second comment I had is some years ago I've gone through a number of MRFs. Some years ago I went through the MRF in New Jersey, and a Rube Goldberg is a good way to describe it. It is an absolutely amazing facility, as your slides well showed. But your slides don't show how amazing it really is. And I think that our committee would benefit from a tour of your facility. I don't know if that's arrangeable, and I don't even know if we can have a large group of our committee come together in a place and violate the open meetings law. Somebody else has to guide me on that, but I really would like to see us take a visit to the Sims facility.
I would love to host you. We are just dipping our toes back into in-person tours. We're hoping, we haven't announced anything. I'm hoping in the summer we'll be able to open back up to groups of 10 vaccinated adults. So I could certainly, you know, I'm counting how many, I could certainly take you in 2 small groups, or, you know, if it happens that only 10 want to come, perfect. But you have my email, so do reach out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marty. I want to mention something that Marty said, which I think hits the nail right on the head, and we can talk about this either later on another meeting. Is, does anyone remember the ad of the Indian crying a long time ago? And it said, "Please keep America beautiful." So that ad was actually produced and paid for by the beverage companies, Coca-Cola, Pepsi. And it was because they were against environmental regulations. And you're probably like, wait, why would they produce that commercial? Because they were trying to push off the responsibility of recycling and environmental cleanliness to individuals. Like you guys should, you guys should recycle, you guys should do this, you guys shouldn't do plastic bags. And it was a very popular ad, and it changed the narrative, when in essence, really, like Marty, like you said, the biggest polluters are these huge companies. It's like 90% of pollution are the huge companies, not if we bring a plastic or a recyclable bag to Whole Foods. But anyway, it was an interesting point that you made, and
Yeah.
that thing. Anyway, Myrna. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kara.
No, that's fine. I will just say that those companies are they're starting to change and realize, oh, we are being taken to task. We need to do something. So we as consumers need to keep pushing them, but also know they are starting to make these changes and starting to make commitments and saying they will change. So we need to then hold them to those commitments and keep pressing them to make set bigger targets and then meet those targets. And that's being done in some places through legislation, which is one way to push them all to get it done.
Myrna.
Thanks, Kara. That was a very informative presentation. I actually just recently, there was an article in the New York Times as well. That's why, like a week ago, I learned that cartons need to go and not in the cardboard, but in the plastic bin. My question is, the people that you sell the bales to, do you keep track of what they do with those bales, so they do what they're telling you they're going to do? I guess my concern is that there is such a thing as the first world sort of exporting their trash to the third world and causing environmental damage there. Is that something that's of concern, or is that not?
We're lucky at Sims that we have advanced sorting capabilities. So because of that, our bales they're pretty good. They're pretty clean. So we're able to keep them in the domestic market. One reason that materials were going to China was because you could sell a bale of mixed material, mix of many different types of plastic, and they would just take it and no one would really talk about it until they realized, actually, we're getting a lot of trash and this is a problem. And that's an immense simplification of a large issue. But our bales, we never needed to do that. So we never and still do not sell our plastic or paper bales over to China. We're able to keep them domestic. And yes, we do vet our customers. And we know what they're doing with the materials and that they're not just dumping it. And we're selling them valuable stuff. So we know we're not selling them trash.
Thank you.
Candace.
Hey, Kara. Thank you for that presentation. I was blown away about just the pictures and like the glass, the soft plastic. Is there any way for us to get like a PDF and if I can share this with my landlord? We have so much. The A cartons, I don't know. I put them with the paper. Who knows? I've been really educated. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll send you the full PDF too, as a bit more information on it. And if you want posters or signage, you can get all of that on the DSNY website. nyc.gov/sanitation. You go, I think, to services, recycling. You can find and download and order posters, stickers, all of the things. It's all free.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll drop that link into
David.
Thanks for that presentation, Kara. It was really informative and fascinating. You mentioned that only rigid plastics are recyclable. A lot of stuff these days comes into my apartment from delivery companies like Amazon, and often it's like the blue and white padded bags. Are any of those recyclable? Because I think some of them have a marker on them saying that they are.
So our friend, the blue and white bag, Amazon is switching more and more to paper. They are trying to make that transition, but I think we'll still see some of these around. So this would be considered a flexible or a soft plastic or plastic film, whatever you want to call it. It's not rigid plastic. So it does not belong in your recycling bin, really anywhere in this country, not just in New York City, but anywhere in the United States. What you can do with these plastics and these plastics and I don't know, more, but bread bags, newspaper bags, any stretchy plastic bag or soft plastic is you can take them back to participating stores for recycling. Now, that requires an extra step. So I don't know how many people are going to do that, but that's actually what this symbol is telling you to do. If you can read in the middle, if it focuses, it says store drop off.
Ah,
Unfortunately, I think it's in kind of small writing, so not everyone's going to catch it. But it's telling you that's the way you can recycle it. I know Home Depot does it, Target, Stop and Shop, and some drugstores will have special bins towards the front of there.
so given that Amazon and Whole Foods are the same thing now, you could probably drop those off at Whole Foods, right?
Some Whole Foods will, yes. That whole legislation recently changed with the bag ban. The rule used to be if you give people plastic bags, you have to have a bin to then collect them for recycling. But that got thrown off. Whole Foods doesn't have to give that. They don't give the plastic bags anymore. So they don't have to have their recycling bin any longer. So I think some of them have opted to.
And there must be just a gigantic amount of cardboard that gets recycled because everyone's
Yes.
getting everything delivered to their home these days.
Yes. And that shot up, of course, during the pandemic, and the value of it shot up during the pandemic. So the paper market was really in trouble for a while, but the pandemic, there were supply chain issues, there were issues getting cardboard. So suddenly the cardboard from the municipal stream started looking really good, and there was more need for it. So.
Okay. Well, thank you.
See, Katie has come over. Katie, do you have a comment? Katie is the queen of trash.
Of course.
Yay!
Hey,
Like
Kara.
before.
I think most people know me, Katie Savage, founder of the Hell's Kitchen Litter Legion. Thank you for a great presentation. I mean, I think my secret is out that I learned most of my recycling knowledge from you and the Sims virtual tour. But I think it's really important for people to understand how recycling is a commodity. It's not garbage. There is an aftermarket use for this, and we need to treat it as such. In that, you know, like a lot of people, we see people on the street collecting cans. They're collecting it because it has value. And a lot of cans that end up in our corner litter baskets would not otherwise be recycled if not for these people that dig through and pull the cans out. And I'm really happy to hear that paper prices have gone up, because I was really concerned that there would be too much paper, but it's good to know that there is an equal demand for that paper. And I also love the pizza box thing. I know that's something that I've posted about a lot recently, and how confusing it is. There are so many people that say, oh, just, you know, tear the lid off, only recycle the non-greasy part. If there's one single spot of grease, it can't be recycled. So it's, you know, great more people know that. And for Manhattan specifically, and in our district, we have the 59th Street transfer station where all of Manhattan's paper goes to, and then goes down to Pratt. So that is part of our district. So we are part of the greater recycling system for New York. I guess that's all I wanted to say. I could talk about trash forever, but I won't.
Thanks, Katie. Does anyone else have any questions for Kara? No, so Kara, I mean, I want to know, and this is probably more the bigger issue. We, in New York City, right? I mean, about 70% of our residential trash could actually be recycled in some way. And we just don't have a great comprehensive system in New York. Are you in talks with the city? Like, you know, like how does that work with Sims, and how much better they can be doing? Because that will probably be our next meeting or so, where we'll discuss this with DSNY.
Yeah, I mean, there are two angles, or there are two areas you can sort of approach with that. There's recycling, residential recycling, the metal, glass, plastic, and the paper side, and then there's the compost side. And we all know the struggles that's happening on that side, but that's a third of our waste right there. A third of our waste is suitable for composting. A third of our waste could go in the recycling bin. So again, I'll leave that compost struggle. But on the recycling side, you know, DSNY does have programs. Wow, they're going to be suffering if their budget keeps getting cuts in and out and in and out and in and out. So that's very challenging. But, you know, so often people go to DSNY, why don't you do television commercials and radio commercials? And it's because that would eat up their whole budget like that. And then they wouldn't be able to do any of the other wonderful, important things they do for the city. So it's always a struggle getting this message out. But some of their programs They have in-school programming. They work with Grow NYC to do in-school programming and get with kids. You know, I'm sort of a branch of their programming. I'm only one person, but I do a lot of school tours, virtual for now, and a lot of community group tours to kind of, you know, get people on the team, help get the word out. But they do offer apartment building programs where they'll come to your apartment building and they will teach you how to recycle right and where to put your signage. And, you know, they do have methods of outreach to try to get that recyclable 34% in there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I'm glad that maybe the in-person tours will be back. Because I know there were a lot of school tours, right? That went kids that would come.
Yeah, I would have huge groups of kids running to this place every day. And it was great. And I'm hopeful that it will happen again, maybe next school year.
Great. Thank you so much, Kara.
Yeah,
Committee, I mean, I'll see what you guys say. I mean, I don't think this was more for background knowledge, but unless you think there's a letter somewhere, I don't necessarily, but I definitely would entertain it if someone else did.
And I would just say, feel free to share my contact. Someone has my contact, but feel free to share if anyone has further questions. I'm here.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Kara. Bye-bye.
Leslie, I think a letter becomes more appropriate when we get back to the budget stuff, and that might result after our conversation with DSNY. As I said to you earlier this afternoon, it's also a mayor issue, not just DOS.
Yep, I think you're right. I think this was just more informational background. Okay, we also have something on the agenda here. It's going to be very quick. It's the removal process for aging and mature trees. So I think this came on the agenda out of, Marty, what do you think? The Hell's Kitchen Park tree that was removed? We don't even know, right?
That's why I think it got on the agenda. But
Oh.
you and I were talking to each other earlier today, and we said, how did this get on the agenda?
Yeah.
I think the conversation we had needs to be repeated. As I understand it, mature trees are removed only if they become structurally unstable for some reason or another, and if the Parks Department identifies as that. If we learn of trees that are structurally stable that are removed, we should be writing letters protesting it, because that should not be happening.
I see Ms. Flores is on. Would you like to, from Parks, how are you? I think the major point was when trees are removed, how quickly can they get put back in if that is the case, and what was the process? Could you give us insight on that?
Yeah, so mature trees are beloved. They provide a lot of shade. It's not something we would want to do. You don't have a process for removing something that's perfectly healthy. I happened to be at Hell's Kitchen Park, and I ran into Tom, and he actually brought it to my attention that the tree was marked with paint. And so when we have something marked with paint, it's sometimes for a contractor to do pruning or removal. And so I checked out the tree with him, and it had extensive rot around the base of the tree. And this is a very large tree, which had a large limb removed last year. And it made it to where it was toppling toward the play equipment. And it's something that you would not want to have happen. You wouldn't want it to be falling over on anyone. So it was assessed and deemed a higher risk, and it was removed. So it's something that each tree has to get inspected if it's got a problem, and then our foresters, who are experts, assign it a risk rating and then evaluate it for what care it needs. So we have many trees to deal with. It's not something we do and want to do. It's something that we have to do, and we put it on a long list for things to deal with. So once it's removed, it gets stump ground and evaluated for whether that site is still suitable. And it hasn't been evaluated yet. It's not on that list yet, but it can be, and it needs to be evaluated. So we'll get back to you with what result that is. So it's something Commissioner Castro is looking at, and all of our foresters are looking at to see if it's viable.
Great. Yeah. Could you get back to what you think next month we can get just an update on that or
Sure.
when? That would be great. And I know the Hell's Kitchen Park one was a big deal because it provided most of the shade. I remember that we had meeting after meeting over that one tree. Because it provided most of the shade of the toddler playground, if you remember. And that was,
Yes.
it was a very long conversation that went back and forth. But okay, great. Thank you so much. Oh, Chris has a question
Thank you, Chair.
or comment.
It'll be a little bit of both. So this is the second mature tree that's been taken down in that area. You know, many meetings have been had about natural shade. Obviously, Tom Kaler, who has been a caretaker of the park, takes removal of these trees seriously. And unfortunately, at the toddler area, the shadow study wasn't done appropriately. And the shade that was built for the toddler area was actually placed on the northern side.
My text, right?
Somebody on?
I was calling you. All right, no problem.
I got somebody's microphone that's hot right now.
I think it's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, Hell's Kitchen Park was an abandoned lot for a long time. It's valued park space for children and parents. I really do hope that if it's not viable, and I hope it is viable, that there are some form of green alternatives and planning put ahead to appropriately create shade for that space. And then I've also noticed that there's been a number of trees removed in the community over the last month or so on sidewalk spaces. If you can continue working with us on identifying those spaces for replanting, that'll help out quite a bit. That's all.
Absolutely. We have a lot of apps on 311 that help us to do that. And we have a system that tracks it very closely. So if there's anything you have an address for and you have a question about, you're welcome to send it to me and we'll look into it and make sure it's on that planting list.
And Teresa, I think there was a specific ask for Hell's Kitchen Park in that shaded or want to be shaded area over the toddler park. There was a specific ask by us a number of times to look into the playground sales that are used in public playgrounds often, where they put like a sail. I'm not sure of the material, but they put it over the toddler or young children's play area for like a shade cover. Can we look into that again?
Yeah, so the one that was put over the toddler area, the placement of it was chosen because there are 3 separate sewage drains underneath the park that prohibit us from putting the stanchion that holds it into the ground. And so that, we prefer trees, we really do. And I think that park needs capital. A lot of the safety surfaces are really worn out. And I think we walked through it a couple of times. And it's something that we need to review is, maybe we need to add trees in different places and move the playground around so that we actually can get some good coverage again.
Thank you. We appreciate the little update.
Anytime.
I guess next we can go to old and new business. Marty, why don't you take your section on Chelsea Piers and update the committee?
You can't start talking until you unmute, right? I should have learned that by now. At the this is March, at the February meeting, we authorized a letter. We said it would be a difficult letter to write. The letter got approved by the board about the Chelsea Piers lease renewal. But the board asked for a number of changes. It's gone through at least 7 hands, maybe more, with some changes and emendations, attempts to comply with the requests from the full board meeting. And I think it's in its final version and is likely to go out. The only thing additional that I would say is maybe this letter, as it goes out, Janine, can you do this, should be sent to each of the committee members so that they can see the changes that have been made, even if they just have to ratify it. If they see changes that they're not happy with, It might be too late for the letter, but it's not too late for giving us feedback about how that letter went. The main issues were the road and sidewalk interface. The letter, I think, is very strong in saying that lease should not be renewed unless that sidewalk is expanded. And that probably means a lane reduction. There's a lot of suggestions about what Chelsea Piers might do, including moving some of the services that are at the curb inside to the 350 space parking lot. That's the main request. The letter is also careful to praise Chelsea Piers and Hudson River Park Trust, because you felt, and the letter should reflect that feeling, that the piers are a valuable resource for our community. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be critical, and the letter does that too.
And also, I think Trans is now taking
Transportation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the Transportation Committee is taking an interest in this, and it's also volleyed to them as far as the traffic study, the study to actually move the structure and move it in. So I know they are on top of this as well. So it's kind of going to be a little bit of a dual committee process now. Does anyone have any questions about the letter? Roberta?
Not a question about the letter. Appreciate everything about the letter, but would it be helpful to engage in public hearings if we do have opinions about this? And if so, when are they? I don't know if we have like a particular, I know that they have to be on a certain timeline, but if we have a particular date and method of RSVP or hearing about those, that would be helpful.
Yes, I think Janine, you have that date, right? Was it March 22nd, I think, or something it was starting?
Yeah,
There's
I think it was March 22nd.
the public hearing is March 22nd.
Yes, and I think we were talking to Jeffrey and Christine, and I think there's going to be a walkthrough with Trans and a few of us at Chelsea Piers, just to see the visual and to talk about it extensively, and like a serious conversation. I mean, listen, we sent a really thorough, serious letter, and they are taking it seriously, which is a really good sign. So let's see what can come of that. But to answer your question, yes, there is a public hearing, and I think we will probably mobilize a few people to talk, when I say on our behalf, but advocate for what our position is. But yes, anyone can comment and right. And go ahead. I'm sorry, Roberta.
Can you confirm if that is an in-person hearing or public meeting? I assume yes, but I'm also not sure. And if there's an opportunity for to send if you have testimony or something like that.
Yeah, Janine, we can follow up, right? I think there's always, I shouldn't say always, but most always written testimony is accepted in this type of thing. But we can definitely get.
Yeah, I'll look into it and I'll get back to you about it, Roberta.
Thank you,
Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. So Marty, who are we CCing on this letter? Have we included the public advocate at all?
I don't remember whether the public advocate was included. There's a long list of CCs on the letter, but that particular one I don't remember.
I'll double check, but if he isn't, we should make sure that he receives it.
The letter isn't out yet, and I'm going to lay this on you again, Janine. Would you check to see that the public advocate is included, and that'll end the conversation. Thank
Sure,
you.
if he's not on there, I'll add him in.
Yeah, I don't think Mr. Williams was on there, but we could put him on.
Okay.
You only got the final draft this afternoon, so it's clearly not out yet.
Okay.
No, Janine works fast.
She does. And then secondly, I know this is a recorded meeting. Brad isn't here today, but I also just want to give a big shout out to Brad for being that voice with everyone else talking about the need to look at this as if we're rebuilding Chelsea Piers to fit within the Hudson River Park Trust. Really just appreciated that. So Brad, if you're seeing the recording, cheers to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Myrna, I know you had your hand up.
My question was going to be about getting the electeds involved. So after we send out the letter, I'm sorry, I'm just completely new to this. Like, what's the next plan of action to get them involved? Is there an individual outreach, or how does that work?
Yes and yes. I mean, yes, they're definitely individual. A lot of them are CC'd. A lot of them are very much aware. I guess the hierarchy is, who do you go to? Hudson River Park Trust is a state-run, kind of overseen by not the city. So I think there's going to be a lot. DOT will probably also need to get involved as well. But yeah, it's just a lot of advocacy. Right, Marty, would you concur?
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think that's shaping up as the letter goes out, and as the transportation committee weighs in with pedestrian safety on the upland side. I think some of that is going to be expanded, plus the testimony, the 22nd.
Thank you.
Great. And I think we just have one or two more updates. And I'm glad Teresa is actually still on the line. So about 2 weeks ago, because you were there too, Teresa, we went on a parks walk with council member Botcher and Parks. And we went to 3 parks, and I believe, was it Eric who called or was it Parks? I believe it was Eric who called to identify possible improvements at 3 parks. The first one was Gertrude Kelly in Chelsea. And there was talk about, I don't know if you know Gertrude Kelly, they have these old hexagon pavers that are, I wouldn't want to say decrepit, but some of them are trip hazards. Some of them are not even there, absent. And not only do they provide the pathway for the center walkthrough, but they're also on the sidewalk borders. And Therese, correct me if anything I say is wrong, or if there was some sort of agreement made after this walkthrough. But I think Parks was going to leave the sidewalk park there because they did look into it, and it seemed like it was very, very expensive. And there was also some interest to keep the hexagon pavers, because they're very pretty, and they're older, and they're full of character, instead of just putting slabs of concrete there. So I think there was a happy medium that was decided, and Parks was going to look into keeping the hex pavers through the center and seeing what they can do just on the outside where the sidewalks are, because that's where really the trip hazards mostly are. Teresa, is that what you got from that particular park walkthrough as well?
Yes, that's correct. We wanted to reach out to DOT to see if there was, because it's a sidewalk, if we could get those done by them, because they often do sidewalks for us, because they have a means of doing it much easier. I think they do a lot of contracts for sidewalks. So I have that on my list as one of the requests, and then leaving the central pavers and just resetting them where they may be causing trip hazards. So
And when do we
yes, I think
expect
that's there.
when do we expect a reply from DOT?
I can find out. I think that's something we're pursuing through my borough chiefs. So I have to talk to them and touch base with them. So we can get that for the next meeting, hopefully.
That would be great. And then we went to Penn South playground, and I think Eric requested some sort of pilot dog run. Does everyone know the Penn South playground? It's it has the basketball court on the west side, and then right. So there is a south side entrance, which is a narrower part, that I think was identified as a possible pilot dog run. Nothing fancy, but supposedly that's going up. Do you have an update on that, Therese?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a dog run, but hours that dogs can be allowed. So we're actually still in the process of reviewing that and seeing what our rules allow. So I think there's going to be some changes coming up, and I want to talk to Commissioner Castro about that before I make any statements.
Okay, and
You,
also,
you should know on that point that there was some local objection of residents on having a dog run under their windows. And so that idea of a dog run there has some resistance.
Okay. I'll make that known.
and then I think also at that same playground, the long-standing play structure is coming down, right? And it's going to be replaced by an all accessible play structure, or is that not on is that not in the near future? But that's what they were saying, and that's already been paid for or identified, or
I think it's been identified for for an estimate. I'm not sure if they have one yet. So that's something that they would be seeking. So
Okay.
it's,
Can you add
I'm
that
not
to
sure
the
it's
update
fully
list?
funded.
Okay, that would be
I
great.
sure can.
Thank you.
No problem.
And then I guess the last was McCafferty, right? And I think Eric was looking to see if there could be a dog run place there. So I'm not sure. I think that's a conversation between his office and you guys. But I think it was more of an idea than really following through on that. Is that right, Therese?
It's a pretty heavily used playground, so I think it was seen as a site that's not feasible for that. So I can get from Commissioner Casher what he actually decided and what was discussed with Eric, because I don't think we left there with a complete idea of exactly whether it was feasible or not, but we pretty much decided that it's so heavily used by the kids, it's not somewhere we could put in the playground areas. So so yeah, there's a lot that needs to happen at that park, but I'm not sure about the decision as to whether it can be somewhere dogs can be off leash. It's a lot of the rules between playgrounds and what we do at playgrounds that has to be reviewed too.
I just wanted to update everyone because that was a CB4 walk that they invited, council member and Parks Walk that they invited CB4 to. So I wanted to just give everyone some updates. And I also told them, and for the record, we actually do have budget requests for parks. And we really would like it if our priorities would be addressed as well, instead of some of these, just all of a sudden ideas popping up. We have a very specific list every year that we go over that our community board advocates for as parks budget priorities. And we would really like that to be considered as well.
Gotcha. I'll get an update from Steve soon, and then I'll have it back to you by the next meeting. And we
Great.
discuss what the list is and what the priority list is.
Great, thank you. And I think our last thing, Janine, did you get my email about the picture for the mural?
Yeah, I'll share it now.
So Janine sent, I guess this is from Parks also. I'm trying to find the email.
There is one thing after this about the harbor meeting that Gwen attended.
Oh, yes, you mentioned that at the top. So I guess Parks is, let's see, they are going to put in a basketball court mural at McCafferty on the floor of the basketball court. It's going to be also not just an artist project, but it's also going to be part of a refurbish or resurfacing of the court, which will include crack repair, patch fill, color coding, which is going to be the mural application, removal and replacement of the backboards. Now, this was that's what it's going to look like. Now, this was a complete and total surprise to us because no one has ever said anything in all of our meetings, or even, like I said, during our walk, when we were talking about refurbishing this park, no one 2 weeks ago didn't even say this was on the docket. It wasn't part of our request. We had no idea this was coming. So we don't know where this originated from. I mean, it's a beautiful mural and it looks great. But as far as the resurfacing and the improvements, we just were unaware. Therese, can you give us insight in that process? Because we just walked with you 2 weeks ago and I don't think anyone mentioned it.
Yeah, it's a recent proposal that is our marketing division has a donation that would like to create this mural here. And it's something that I believe we'll be having them present on soon, probably at the next meeting. And because it's still winter, we can't really place it on the court. And also there's a construction permit which has been put in for buildings on the 44th Street side of the park, where I think it involves demolition. And that's something that could impact this court. So it's not something that is impeding us from doing this mural, which we hope to do. It's something that it could impact it if it's not thought through. So we're actually discussing that internally to figure out what impacts it could be and figure out what the developer wants to do on 36, 38, and 50 on 44th Street. And so that's just all new things that have come up recently. It's not something that's been planned for a long time.
The email, though, it kind of mentioned that they want to share this with us because they don't know if they'll have time to formally present it before work was being started, which spoke to me that it was going to be started within the next month.
That's not what I heard. Sorry.
All right,
Okay,
good.
so I can
That'd be great,
find
'cause then if
out
we
for
could
sure.
put-
I know they
Okay,
have these murals. They have these murals lined up for potentially at any park. So I think they chose our park, which is really great. So I'm gonna get more information for you right away in an email.
Yeah, and then we can
see.
put on the next month's agenda, just so we have an understanding of the process. Is that okay?
Sure.
Great. I think it is pretty. It'll be cool. Does anyone have any questions about those, that piecemeal update on the parks? Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. Just gonna lower my hand. So I believe we had received a presentation about a potential mural on a basketball court, CB4, about maybe 2.5 years ago, back in 2019. Lowell's nodding his head. Yes, so we definitely did that. And one of the things that I had actually called out was that mural was an imperfect application of what a court's usage is by tradition. And so I do appreciate the actual box out markings on the around the free throw space, inside the paint, if you will, even though now the totality of the court is the paint, because it does allow for people who are just practicing, children or adults, practicing their shots and playing around the world. It gives them that opportunity to still utilize the space, even though we're reimagining what it looks like. Janine, does the Hell's Kitchen land use have any updates about that building demolition at all? Or will we be hearing about that next month? Will Joe, JD, and Paul Devlin be updated on that?
I'll need to check in for the agenda for next month. I'll get back to you on that.
Lowell?
As Chris mentioned, this idea of murals on the basketball courts have come up before. And I kind of remember when Brett Furfer was on the committee, because Brett is a basketball player, he said that these murals were not a great idea because they were distracting as hell to the basketball players. And so I'm wondering what checking Parks has done with people who actually use the court, who, are they okay with this idea? Or is it just a pretty idea that's going to drive the basketball players crazy? Because first and foremost, it's a basketball court.
Let me check and see. They may have. So I can't really answer to that. I apologize, but
Thanks,
I can
Chris.
get that back to you.
The biggest reimagining of a court was actually done in Marcy houses. It was funded by Tracy Morgan, who is from that area. And then I believe they also do it at Rucker Park as well on occasion.
Yeah, it was proposed originally, I think, a couple of years ago for Chelsea Park.
That's correct.
And what we ended up saying is what was being done was temporary, not permanent, meaning it was for some short-term promotion. And it was okay on that basis, but there was pushback from basketball players about it. At least one basketball player who was a member of this committee at the time
So I'd like to know that, we're not just, oh, it's a pretty picture and someone wants to pay for it, but that it's actually been, contemplated by the people who use the court.
Yeah, Ramona Ponte Park, when it had its full court, was also painted before it was reprogrammed.
That's
I played
what
on
I
that
think-
all the time.
I think
Yeah,
we need a
because-
comprehensive presentation on this change, because this is a pretty big change. And it's renovations to a park that we
Yeah,
were
because
unaware
it's
of.
done by parks, but for example, the basketball courts in Hudson River Park are straight courts. They don't do this kind of design work, and I'm thinking there's probably a reason for it. If you want to do a parquet, like Boston Garden, that'd be one thing, but
I'll take your comments back and make sure they're well known.
thanks.
Great. Anyone else? No, I think Marty had one more update with Gwen, I believe, and then we can wrap this up.
I went to this Corps of Engineers presentation on what they're doing about the flooding, I guess, on the East River. And what I mostly, the whole presentation is supposed to be on YouTube. I've not looked for it there yet, but there were a lot of charts and so forth. So it would be really useful if anybody's interested in this to probably take a look at that, because otherwise from a description, it would be just, difficult. So the only concern that I have is that I understand that they're probably getting, more comments about flooding than anything else, but it needs to be looked at all together with, a more of a master plan sort of thing over there. Now, I'm not suggesting they do a new plan or anything. I don't know what they've done, but I just think that that you don't want to just do it for flooding and then find out, oh God, that interferes with the, power plant we're going to put there or something, and so that's about all I have to say. I would look it up on YouTube.
I have something to add to that, if it's okay with you, Gwen. I caught the end of that meeting, and what struck me was that there is a planning for flood mitigation. If you imagine Manhattan Island, and it's been called the Big U. If you imagine the east side of the U being flood mitigated down through the park at the south of Manhattan. And then as you start going up the west side into Community District 2 and then 4, it turns out that they are concerned with flooding in our districts, but there is no planning going on about our districts and flood mitigation in our districts. And it just struck me that a flood mitigation in our district is something that we need to be paying attention to. I'm aware that Starrett Lehigh has done a lot of mitigation on its own property, and as they should have, but I'm not aware, and they weren't aware of any broader planning for flood mitigation in District 2 or 4.
Well, there was a great deal done when they built Battery Park City, because I was talking to one of the engineers on that, and he said at the time they were planning it, they planned to build it, and they did build it 12 feet higher than the surrounding area, figuring that, with the water rise, and I don't know, we may have different statistics now that, things are changing, but that was done because they knew that they were going to have a problem if they didn't make it higher than everything around there.
So I wanted the committee to be aware, and I also wanted to publicly thank Gwen for being so willing to go and report back to us about it. It's an important issue that we need to keep at least on our back burner, if not our front burner.
Yep.
Thank you, Gwen.
Sure.
So we have no letters coming out of WPE today. Oh, Roberta, are you gonna propose a letter?
Maybe, but maybe not a letter. I was just hoping to gather some information. I specifically was curious if the committee had ever written a letter surrounding local law 97, the green buildings law. I mention it specifically because the enforcement for that law is now kind of under threat in the mayor's budget. This bill is kind of landmark climate legislation, and enforcement is a huge piece of being able to enact that law. I was wondering if the committee had ever either discussed or brought that up, and if it might be something that would be appropriate to bring into the budget process.
We can definitely put it on the agenda. Would you be interested in that for a further conversation?
I would, and if it's helpful, I can see if there's someone who would be able to speak to that specifically, either from the advocacy or former government community, but I certainly think it would be worth discussing broadly and its impacts here in the community.
That's awesome. We can talk to Janine about setting that up.
Thank you so much.
That actually brings me to one last point. So when we do our budget asks at the end of the year, and our priority with the budget task force, and we send it into the city, everything on there has to be, for the most part, yes, pretty much everything has to be something that we discussed at committee. So if you guys have any ideas or something that you're interested, send us an email. Because then if we get it on committee discussion and talk about it, and if it's some sort of ask, we can then include it. If it's deemed, that we think it's appropriate for our asks. So, Roberta, that's great. We'll look at putting it on an upcoming agenda.
Thanks.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Any
Second.
seconds? Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Thank you, Leslie.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.